that key performance indicators, for example, should actually drive performance and not just drive compliance. They should measure ways by which you have been able to achieve your goals or your mandate. And I think that's a challenge with terms like KPI or OKRs or whatever these terms are relating to performance. And hopefully, we see more of that in organizations or particularly in government agencies where I think there's a shift now to something more meaningful, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the final episode for the year, the season finale of Tip Talks. The last time we were here, we started working with catchphrases that had to do with work and business in general. And actually, it's pretty successful. In fact, the list kept on growing and growing. And now we have so many more to add to the list. And a lot of them are, I would say, well, considering my age, are more up to date and contemporary.
So I guess for all of you as our viewers, our loyal fans, you pretty much know who we are. I'm Dino Santos. I'm a Toastmaster. I'm a consultant, a DTM, a Hall of Famer, and I do love to do shows like this that take apart speeches and speakers and words that they use. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Dino. And as you all know, I'm probably, maybe you'd call me that crazy old uncle or that crazy grandfather who has these crazy ideas about what's going on simply because that's what my life experience brings to this
Mm.
group. Over to you, Hakee.
All right, hello everyone. Hello Tip Talks. I'm Hakee Herrera, a mechanical engineer by trade, but on the side, I'm a fledgling Toastmasters who joined maybe 2 years ago. I'm the current area director for Area 1 of Division B, District 75, and I'm always curious to learn from seasoned speakers like my fellow panelists here. And that's it for me. Back to you, Dino.
Okay, so let's hear from Janice.
Hi, everyone. So I've been a regular here on Tip Talks, Janice Mendoza. I'm also a Toastmaster and I am a public servant by profession. So I work in legislation, dealing with both the intersection of public policy and politics. And I love analyzing speeches, dissecting uh, techniques that are used by prominent speakers, and also having a discussion with great minds, other great minds.
Okay, over
Thank
to
you,
you, Paul.
Janice. Thank you, Dino. So let's get this episode going. Very excited after I saw the meme because there's so many words there that actually made me laugh. And since it was Janice who contributed it, let's ask Janice to be the first person to select one of these catchphrases. Dino, do you have can we share the catchphrase?
There it
Please.
is.
Well, just probably as a background for our viewers, this was a meme coming from this page called SGAG that I saw on Facebook that apparently Hakee already saw also. And it instantly reminded me of our last episode. So it was really aligned with the sole idea of all of these catchphrases and all of these buzzwords being used in the workplace. And some of them, actually, looking at this meme, some of them I use pretty regularly, and some are with usage over time. You're not really sure anymore if it's still meaningful, or are people just you throwing out these words for the sake of sounding smart or you know being in, so to speak, in the current corporate lingo. So looking at this meme, what caught my attention, although I'm not sure if this is exclusively something that's used in a corporate or work setting, but the phrase "thought leader,"
Oh,
uh, it's something that is thrown around pretty frequently when you're in an online space, especially when you're looking at publications or other sources of knowledge or media. And I feel that it it a lot of times, given that how frequently it is used, it has also lost its meaning. I mean, you use the title thought leader. What are people really deserving of that title? How does
Mm.
one really become a thought leader? And it becomes a license for people to parade themselves in a way that this person may or may not be a credible source of knowledge for a particular subject interest, but it becomes a badge that becomes meaningless because of how many people are using the phrase thought leader. So I don't know if people have the same experience as I do, but that is something that I'm not entirely against, but the way that's been used so much, I'm not sure if it still carries any more weight within the discussions or whatnot.
Yeah, why don't we start with that? Fine suggestion. So,
Good start.
who'd like to begin?
Why, Dino? Why don't we go with you?
Okay, I'm guilty of using that phrase a lot, especially when I introduce a guest to our sister show, which is the Leader's Edge. Uh, he's a thought leader in this industry or in this particular topic, in artificial intelligence. So I use that often. And come to think of it, sometimes I may feel that I am talking with somebody who may know something about the topic but might not have as much depth of knowledge behind it as a somebody who is really a thought leader. Sometimes all those acronyms after their name uh, seems to help out and help me believe that they are. So, yep, I'm with you. I think there's another catchphrase that goes well with that, and that sometimes we call it as there is a phrase that describes somebody who's like pretending to be. Uh, I, I forget that exact phrase for that, but I may
Imposter
remember it
syndrome.
later. Yeah, the imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how I feel about it. I worry sometimes that when I say that about somebody, um, I might I might either be putting too much pressure on them, or maybe helping them feel bigger than they really are.
Good points. Very good points. I'll go last. How about you, Haki?
Yeah, sure. So when it's using the word thought leader, it's usually conflating with an influencer from my experiences. So whenever I see things on TikTok or maybe headlines from tabloids, it's they usually casually throw the word thought leader uh on some influencer who's not really a thought leader, not even a thought, maybe. So it's they're throwing it so casually, but if
Mm,
it's used properly, it's great. It's fine, like you said, But
mm,
like Dino and Jani said, we throw it around so effortlessly that it loses all meaning and all that.
mm,
All right. Thank you. For me, the funniest thing about the thought leader is the person who calls himself a thought leader. That's even crazier. I'm a thought leader. I go, really? Okay. And, and it's funny. One of the very first interviews I did at the beginning of the pandemic. Okay. The guy introduced me as an expert. I says, I'm not an expert.
mm.
Because if you really are an expert, you'll know that you don't know. You know
Right.
this. So the last thing is call yourself an expert. What are you? So anybody who calls himself a thought leader for me is just I don't know. Okay. But the,
Right.
the the challenge the challenge of thought leader and many of the other terms that are on this list is it's there was no real clear definition about
Mm.
what a thought leader is,
Mm.
and so it was easily misused and abused, if you want to say, because it sounds nice. Hakee is a thought leader. Jan Ace is a thought leader. It sounds nice,
Mm.
and it sounds also like a very intelligent comment.
True.
Okay,
True. It's a lot
and
like,
sometimes,
yeah.
yeah.
It's a lot like the way I feel about, say, ads that say masterclass this, masterclass that, right next to having another ad that says taught by a thought leader. So, like, oh, really?
Actually, I think masterclass is a marketing gimmick.
Mm.
Okay, because when I reviewed those online courses, how to build them, they said then you can create a master class.
Mhm.
That's what the idea was. So I think it's more of a marketing gimmick. Gimmick, just like thought leader. It's a term that attracts attention. But like all of you have pointed out, it's overused.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it's kind of lost its power, if you want to say.
True.
And it's become, well, the term I'm thinking of is trite.
Mm-mm.
Okay, it's what the hell, thought leader again. Find something else. All right. But those are my thoughts. But that was an excellent choice to get us going, Janice. How about you, Hakee? Among those wonderful words, can you flash it again? Which one would you like to pick?
All right, so maybe this is a recent experience of mine, but I'd like to pick roadmap because it's
Oh,
there's a funny there's a
Yeah.
funny story about this one.
Okay.
So I've been hanging out with friends from time to time, and we were talking about the work and all that, and sometimes I just say on one of our conversations, somehow the corporate lingo got to me, and I said, "Oh my God, we got to think about our roadmap to what we're gonna do to this for this night." And everyone, the group just stared at me, and I was like, "Why are you using that word outside work?" So I'm guessing that's just a segue to roadmap, which is, I guess we just again we use it very casually, but in I believe that roadmap should be used very strategically because we are trying to communicate a specific plan or strategy. But sometimes when I hear roadmaps from project managers and all that, it usually just says, I have a concept of a plan in my mind.
Mm.
But what do you guys think?
are you planning to eat cats and dogs by any chance? I'm just kidding. That came out when you said I have a concept of a plan.
I know what you're referencing.
Mm.
I love how you got the reference.
I know what you're referencing.
But I'll pick it up from there. Admittedly, it's a term because when it comes to training and facilitating, it's a term that's used frequently
Mm.
by the learning and development groups of organizations. They always have
True.
to have a roadmap, roadmap, roadmap. They'll have their training plan, if you want to say. Okay, their training, yeah, the training plan. Maybe the only difference is the training plan, at least technically, is just usually for the year. The roadmap might go until 5 years.
Mm.
Okay. But you raise an interesting point about the roadmap. First of all, fortunately, I've never made that error of using corporate lingo while hanging around with friends. Okay. So, but there's another funny story about that, but maybe that's for later. But when it comes to that, the roadmap, it's for me, it's a term that just has to be used correctly. It has its own place, if you want to say, and it's used when used correctly, it makes sense. But the thing you pointed out is oftentimes in corporate setting, it's confused with a strategy.
Yeah.
Okay, now, and this can get very confusing because a lot of companies think they have a strategy, but in reality, they have not a strategy. Okay. I'll just give you an example, a very popular example, something that's easy to relate to. If you look at Apple, their strategy is very simple: think different. period.
Mm.
Okay. And then everything they do is aligned with that concept.
Mm.
Companies rarely have something like that,
Yeah.
a strategy that can be explained in one sentence only. I don't need those, we plan to be the leading organization. None of that. It's just a simple thing to do. It's the strategy of the organization. It's not a plan. It's it's deciding what you're going to do.
Mm.
Period. How you're going to do is the roadmap. I'm okay with that. But the strategy gets a little confusing. Many companies they confuse the two, or they don't even have a strategy straight. They have a plan right away. Okay, and companies that have been around for a long time. Apple hasn't been around for a long time, but if you look at Mercedes Benz, they've been,
Mm.
gosh, they're more than 100 years. If you look at them, they just say, "What is it? The best or nothing." That's a strategy. Okay, and then everything they do aligns with that. Amazon, famously, they're the ones who started this whole. And it's one of the words that is customer centric
Mm.
thing, but it's not so much just the customer centric. It's the how do you say? It's the fanaticism in which they drive it. That's their strategy. Okay, they're really focused on customer centricity, if you want to say. But many companies get it confused. Maybe that's why sometimes the roadmap is also misunderstood.
Mm.
Okay. All right. Dino or Janice?
Janice.
Well, well, I agree with Paul. The same observation. It's when I was listening to Paul, I was having the same thoughts about how the concept of a roadmap is linked with strategy and how the people normally mix strategy up with a roadmap. I used to, in my previous job, we used to teach strategy management principles to public sector institutions. And one of the first things that we normally did was to define what the concept of strategy is. And a realization that I had when we were going through all of those sessions is really like people throw around the term strategy so much,
Mm.
where it they again, because it's thrown around so much, it it doesn't really have any distinct meaning anymore.
Mm.
And a lot of times that same idea or that same phenomenon happens when you look at the word roadmap. For a roadmap, people just broadly use it to talk about a plan or whatnot, but there's really like a particular concrete technical definition along inside the business circles. And when you use these words so much and it gets thrown around so much, as Paul said, it gets, when it's used in the right context, it's very useful, and it's very good for the right context. But when it gets thrown around in so many settings, the meaning gets muddled, and it loses the proper usage that makes it much more meaningful in those conversations. So roadmap and also strategy, I think, are two words that get thrown around, that are linked together, that get are suffer under this kind of phenomenon.
Mm. My
Thank you.
own
That was nice.
my
Yes,
own
Dino.
thoughts about it, Paul and Janice. Um, if I were to use a word in Tagalog, hugot. Meron akong hugot. The reason being that when I was active in an association that I won't name here, years and years ago, I was seated next to a person who I'd met for the first time. So I decided I'd be friendly because I'm in a luncheon with colleagues in the industry. So I may as well make friends, pass some cards, get to know them, let them get to know me, and then the lady just suddenly asked me, "So, what's your process strategy for something like this?" And that caught me off guard. And I didn't like the feeling about not understanding what her question was. So I sort of nudged my companion to that gathering, Daisy Sanchez, and I said, "What on earth is she talking about?" And she goes, "I think she means lesson plan." So I told her, "Why didn't she just say lesson plan? Why'd she have to say process strategy?" And so okay, my process strategy is, and so I started to explain what my process strategy was. And so I set that as a backdrop because the first time I heard roadmap, I didn't understand its context in training. Back then, I thought when it was first mentioned that they were referring to a literal hard copy thing that you fold and unfold to find where you were going. Like, and I was thinking, don't we have ways for that now, or Google Maps? So then, after she finished her thought, that's the only time that I finally got what she meant was a framework for the way that they were going to do what they planned to do. And then other terms that also triggered me in the past was when somebody sidled up to me and said, "So, what are your metrics for this particular KPI?" And back then, when that was really really new, which kind of reveals my age, but that's fine. Um, it threw me off again, and I really don't like that feeling of being thrown off, because in my mind, when I thought about metrics, I thought about more of a training matrix. In other words, like, you'd have a series of training programs that are either for basic learners, advanced learners, skilled learners, subject matter experts, management, and the rank and file. So that was my idea of the matrix. Now I was being asked about metrics, and I wish Daisy was right next to me at that moment when I was asked that, because I wasn't quite sure what to say until later on. Once more, in context, I began to understand that what he meant, or what he was driving at, was how do you measure? How do you measure the improvement of a person's KPI, or key performance indicator? So I I'm very uncomfortable whenever new terms pop up, and I don't understand the the context of it. So that's my hugot.
And to save you, Dino, even in the training industry and in business in general, these terms sometimes have different meanings per organization. They're not all the
Mm,
same. Okay, so I, even when, let's say, I'm interviewing a client for the first time, I ask straight out, when they say a word like that, metrics, can you help me define what the metrics are? So at least I know what they're talking about.
mm,
Okay, so because it's really all over the place. They all have different meanings. That said, KPIs is one of the words, right? KPIs and OKRs.
yeah.
It's one of the words, right?
Yes, it
So
is.
let's take those KPI and OKR. Usually they're together, if I'm not
Mm,
mistaken. Okay, because even again, please correct me if I'm wrong. I understand OKR as, I know them as KRA, key
mm,
result area, and then they're broken down to KPIs. If
mm.
I'm not mistaken, the OKR is pretty much a KRA. Or
Okay.
am I? Or see, I'm getting confused with it myself. Okay, no, is that right?
Um, um,
What does OKR mean?
o- okay. Organizational key results. But
Okay, all right.
let's find out for sure. I mean,
Hakee, Hakee, when you get
Uh,
your performance appraisal, is it OKR or KRA?
I honestly have not encountered OKR at all.
I just searched for it now. It says
objectives and
objectives
key
and key
results.
result.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
so
kind of
I'm guessing it's the same as a KRA. I'm guessing
Yeah. Fair.
because KRA is like the key result. Now, typically, what do you have? You have your strategy, then you have your strategic plan, and then the key result areas are derived from there, and then you go down to the
Mm.
KPIs. Again, to use just a very simple example, let's say you want to become a customer centric organization. So now your key result area is you must have a certain score for your customer experience. Okay. We want to improve our customer experience, and you say, okay, our KPI is, you know, how many times you spoken to the guy and what your score is for that conversation.
Mm.
Typically, that's what the how it breaks down. But what happened here, and this happened, I think, over time, and it happened very insidiously. When I say insidiously, it wasn't obvious.
Mm.
And this is something I struggle with when you talk about performance appraisals because, uh, you know, if Jan Ace is my boss, okay, and I know that he's got the keys to my increase, to my bonus, my tendency is to work towards the KPI and
Mm.
KRA. There's
Mm.
nothing wrong with that, but oftentimes I get lost with I'm not working for the strategy, I'm working for that,
Mm.
and many times they don't align. Okay. And there's always that dynamic because Janice is my boss and he's got the keys to my bonus. There's always that dynamic that I'll
Mm.
just agree with Janice and say, okay, that's to make Janice happy until I get my bonus. That dynamic will always be there. When you layer it, it becomes really challenging
Mm.
to have the KPI or the OKR actually align with the purpose of the organization.
Mm.
This is where you get stuck when you're at work, where you just feel like you're just working to meet a KPI, and you what the hell for? so, uh, so for me, that's what happened when you started focusing too much on the KPI. The strategy
Mm.
or the very existence of the organization now is on a KPI, not the strategy, not being customer centric. In the case of Apple, not thinking differently. In the case of
Mm.
Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing.
Mm.
So it becomes a little tricky. And at the moment, from what I'm seeing, there's a lot of people questioning it. Okay, the thing about it is, unfortunately, there has to be a way to measure performance.
Mm.
Okay, some way or another. All right, and I think they haven't figured that one yet.
Mm.
Anybody else?
Well, my thought on it was a long time ago, I had just managed to wrap my mind around some of those acronyms, and acronyms do abound. And depending on the industry, they can get even worse. I mean, if it's the banking industry, you might say, "Hey, have you prepared the um, LC for the VIP because it needs to be given with TLC?" Uh, it's like, uh, when I used to work in a bank, acronyms were just all over the place. In fact, they didn't call each other by their names. They'd say, "Oh, they have you prepared a proposal for AOV? Remember that NLP is going to get upset if you don't deliver it um, right." There's another acronym for meaning to say right away, which I can't quite remember now. But the point to what I'm sharing is that back then, I had just managed to wrap my mind around things like, okay, here's a job description, and then right below that is your KRAs or key result area. So if it's somebody who is a salesperson, a key result area is to be able to meet their sales targets. And then below that would be their KPIs or the key performance indicators that will help them attain their key result areas. And then somewhere below is your PRD, your position results description. What does success look like if you must describe it? And so when OKR came along, I really wasn't quite OKR with it because I got confused. uh, Once I got used to KPI, and then there are some people who are saying that OKRs are better or they can work with KPIs. So this means I have to reframe and rewrap my mind around what those terms are because currently most of us are used to hitting KPIs and the metrics that go with them. And so the OKR is a new animal in the zoo. So over to you, Paul. Oh, you're on mute.
Before I pass it on to Janice, That's exactly one of the situations because an OKR it's the main goal.
Hmm.
The KPI is the steps you take to get to the main. Because that's how I understand a KRA. You start with the KRA first, and then under
Hmm.
the KRA are the KPIs.
Yes.
So it should be the guiding goal. In fact, KPIs in themselves, if they're just there, it's kulang because there should be a KRA.
Hmm.
Should be.
Hmm.
So maybe that's part of the confusion. But let's hear from Hakee or Janice.
Yeah, actually, I agree with you, Paul, that you said that using KPIs is just like some people just use it to game the system to gain the desired results, and
Hmm.
maybe that compromises their overall quality or ethics, more or less. But I will also want to attack it on another angle, and I'm not sure if you would agree with this viewpoint. So maybe it's something personal and subjective, but when we use KPIs in our speeches or in our talks, maybe I feel like we are trying to treat people like a numbers game, right?
Hmm.
We're essentially boiling down people into numbers.
Hmm.
And with the advent of AI, we're trying to become more human than the AI, right? And we're not trying to sound like Skynet saying a bunch of ones and zeros. So yeah, I just feel like it's a little dehumanizing
Hmm.
to just say KPIs and numbers this, numbers that, and all that. But do you guys agree with that point?
Yeah, I do. To a certain extent, um, we are now defined by how we perform. That's why sometimes trainers are described as performance specialists. In other words, our task is to help people improve their performance. So that's another term that changed because it used to be trainer, and then of course we wondered, what do you mean, people trainer or an animal trainer? Which one is it? And then that became facilitator, implying that the word facilitator is a step above being merely a trainer because you facilitate learning, you enable people to learn, to grasp new ideas. And then now we get to performance specialists. So terminologies change all the time and it can be bewildering. So I'm with you on that, Hacky, in that it can be dehumanizing as well. Bec- and there's a reason for that because you hear this all the time. How do you measure the benefits coming from soft skills training? Unlike technical skills, you say you assemble 4 toasters per hour. That's measurable. That makes sense. So when you approve the budget for helping people to assemble toasters, and the goal, one of the objective is to help them be able to put it together, four toasters per hour, and then they're doing it. So they're hitting their KPIs. So that's fine. Um, and they went for that because it helped them to measure the ROI that came from investing in soft skills.
Janice, you have anything to contribute?
Yeah, I think it really, what comes to mind is really how you go back. I go back to how these concepts, you really need to be able to. There's a way for them. There's a way for you to be able to use them to drive success or performance in your organizations. Because, as pointed out by Paul earlier, sometimes it becomes meaningless when what as somebody who was working for and with the government. I remember there was a time when KPIs were really shallow in government offices, to the point where we used to use the term bean counting or sandbagging, where you they define a lot of government offices would define for themselves very shallow indicators like number of meetings conducted or number of people they were able to talk to, which doesn't really mean anything. And it goes back to, I think, the challenge being able to, because the idea of a KPI is not bad in itself, but how do you utilize these concepts to be able to drive performance? And I think there needs to be, if you're in a leadership position, there needs to be a platform for you to be able to emphasize what these things really mean, and that becomes an anchor for people within your organization to be more aware that key performance indicators, for example, should actually drive performance and not just drive compliance. They should measure ways by which you have been able to achieve your goals or your mandate. And I think that's a challenge with terms like KPI or OKRs or whatever these terms are relating to performance. And hopefully, we see more of that in organizations, or particularly in government agencies, where I think there's a shift now to something more meaningful, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I wouldn't know where to begin. Okay, there's just so much going on. And the comment of Dino about how do you measure soft skill, but a typical example, especially in the learning industry, where a KPI can go just completely wrong.
Mm.
Okay, let's say you're an organization that's focused on becoming a learning organization. That sounds nice, right? That's what Microsoft is doing. Learning organization sounds cool. And then so you put up a KPI. Now, let's say the three of you report to me. Example, okay, I'm the manager. On my list, it might read, okay, uh, for the whole year, the three of your supervisors, the three managers, they have to have attended at least 5 courses. And all the courses are online. What I mean online is do it, they see it was completed. Now here's the deal. Okay, let's say Dino in his eagerness to please me, he does 7. Okay, so I should write exceeds expectations on his report card, on his performance appraisal. Okay. Janice, he just wants to what is it? Resign quietly. Okay, and he does 5.
Quite good.
Okay, the minimum required.
Mm.
Hakee naman, he's a little lazy supposedly, and he only does 2. But
Mm.
here's a challenge. Let's say Hakee, of the three of you, he took 1 course and actually saved the company $500.
Mm.
That's not measured. What was being measured was course completion.
Mm.
Okay. The tricky part is you have to switch to measuring impact, not course completion. All right. Now you might come to the conclusion that the more courses I complete, the better chances I have of impact. Agreed. But sometimes you take a course and never really use it. Okay, or it really has no measurable impact. None. Okay. So then you start thinking it's a very big thing to work through. And admittedly, when it comes to soft skills, come on, Wall Street doesn't measure it. Oh gosh,
Mm.
how's your empathy? How's your quarterly empathy score? Come on, they don't measure that. Okay, right? Wall Street, hey, where's my money? Okay, that's something I understand. But internally, I think as a trainer and even as a good leader, you know that it matters.
Mm.
You can't say how much, but you know it matters. You know it works. Okay, so you just have to, at the moment, just go with that how do you call that, trust in it,
Mm.
because I know it works. I've done it twice in my life, and it required me to turn around the company, 2 companies financially, and it really was a soft skill issue, at least the way I ran it. Okay,
Mm.
and it worked. But it's also difficult to say that just because I've expressed empathy and been compassionate, now I get a better profit. It doesn't always add up that quickly. But we know what works. We just have to find a way to maybe connect it. Okay.
Paul, I'd like to revisit
Yeah.
what Hakee said about the dehumanizing aspect of KPIs. And one very, very common example is call center work, where people would be given a KPI, like, for example, 30 calls per hour or something like that. Like maybe you have a quota, and quota in reverse is takot. So everybody's afraid of not hitting it. And so uh, there they are hitting their quotas by keeping to the KPIs. And yet you have the caller experience or the customer experience suffer from it because the caller feels like they're being rushed. to finish what they're asking or trying to get help for. And what if it's a call to complain? So they're given a limit like no more than 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes. Otherwise, you get red flagged, and during the performance appraisal, you'll be cited for that. And yet, isn't the goal to please the customer, to really take care of our customer? What if that irate person just happened to be a key account? Are you still going to keep to your 5 minutes and risk losing a big chunk of the business just because you're trying to hit your KPI? So where's the humanity there? Where is the chance to help the complainant have a good customer experience? So I just wanted to validate Hackey's observation that oftentimes KPI might dehumanize the customer and service professional interaction.
Well, I don't want to maybe spend a little too much time here, but that's outcome of money.
Right.
Okay. No, no. I want to just to be straightforward with this,
Mm.
uh, especially if, and let's get our terms right here. If I say offshore,
Mm.
okay, are you still owned by the company? So if you notice, banks, because they have such a high level of security, okay, they're all offshore. In short, if I decide to work for HSBC, I become an HSBC employee.
Oh.
Okay, so that's offshore. When you outsource it, you give it to another company to do it for you.
Mm.
Okay, so and much of the business is outsourced. Okay, if you talk to people like what's the big one now? The big call center now. Anyway, any of those call centers, just give you an example. Let's say Teleperformance. So Teleperformance, that's still offshore because they still carry the name of
Mm.
the company in Canada. But Concentric, like for example, Concentric, very big, and they have so many different verticals. It's another one of the terms there. Okay, in their company, but they're all contracts with another,
Mm.
and that contract has a money value, and that's broken down to how many calls somebody can handle in a day. Okay, so if my money says in order for me to make a profit, they can't. They have to do 30 calls a day. That's all I measure.
Mm.
Okay, period. When I was working with one call center, and we were bidding against our very own company, but they were in India, we were in the Philippines.
Mm.
Okay, we got the contract. Okay, and at that time, when you compare India and the Philippines, the salary is almost the same. The headache with the Philippines is we had 3 holidays more. Okay, and when you talk about, let's say, I think it was 800 seats, 24/7. That's a lot of people. So just one extra day of holiday meant a lot. Okay, we got the contract. But what happened was now nobody was allowed to go on bathroom break until their actual break. They had no time for training at all, zero. I go, how am I supposed to train these guys? You can't even give me 2 seconds a day. So, that's how bad it got. It reached the point where people were already getting UTI.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
this is crazy. So, but that's an outcome of the contract.
Mm.
Okay, so that's where that issue with the call centers comes.
Mm.
I don't know how they do it now, I really don't, but I'm not up to date with that. But it wouldn't surprise me if it hasn't strayed far. Okay,
All right,
but
so
that's
let's.
that's that's reality. Yes, Dino, can you put up the sign again?
There it is. Hmm.
Uh, which one shall we talk about? I saw a nice one.
I have no
Oh,
idea what.
disruptive innovation.
Oh, yeah. I also don't understand this term slack me. What does that mean?
Slack is a it's a communicator like Messenger.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I,
Okay,
I didn't know
that
that.
that's the name. That's the name. So, if you work in a call center, typically when you're working, you see all these communicators because there's a communicator that you have in your group, then you have a communicator for your team, then you have a communicator with the manager, and then they're
Mm.
always flashing on your screens, distracting you. So that's what Slack means. Okay,
Okay.
Slack is the brand.
Mm.
Okay.
Oh, I learned something new.
For me, the funny one is disruptive innovation. And why
Mm,
do I say it's funny? If you really come to think about it, even innovation,
mm,
how much of it is really for the betterment of humanity, or is it just to make?
mm,
Let's disrupt the how do you call it? Let's disrupt the industry. I said, are you really doing it to to bring some value to the organization, or you just want to make money?
mm,
Okay. And then that got me really thinking because you know this might sound a little strange. Um, if you look at the Walkman, hey, okay,
Oh,
okay,
okay.
that was disruptive, yes, but is that something we really needed? If you think about
Mm,
it, okay, a lot of the innovation coming out, a lot of the new tech today, is just to make money. I don't know what kind of value it actually brings to humanity. Okay, and I was laughing. This is what's going on here, and so for me, that's the funny one. Let's
mm,
disrupt. Let's disrupt. This what for?
mm,
Okay, but this has become a how do you call it? A term that I think arose with the pandemic.
mm,
Okay, because I only heard it really coming out, during the pandemic because they were disrupting and everything. We were disrupted, so we have to disrupt something. So it was getting a little out of hand for me, and you know, even the term.
mm,
Sometimes it always crosses my mind. Are you disrupting just to make money, or is this something that's actually of value? Okay.
mm.
Over to anyone wants to take over.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah, go ahead, Aki.
yeah, actually, I agree, totally agree, Paul, that using the word, using the phrase disruptive innovation is just creating artificial hype around what you're selling to your audience, right? And usually it just says you're overestimating and you're overselling and you're overvaluing the impact of the product. When if you really look at it, it's usually just a new coat of paint over the old one. Yeah, just like the new iPhone. Let's just say 15 to 16. Just one number, just sleeker, new colors.
Mm,
That's it. Or maybe this is very prevalent this year. The prevalence of AI. They just slap AI on phones, right? The label of, oh, this we have this new tech and we're putting it AI, and it's really disruptive, guys. But it's just when you think about it, it's just a voice assistant, and that's it. What's so what's in it that changes the world? It's
mm,
not really, right? Is it really a game changer, or are you just overhyping it just to sell more?
mm.
That's my take on that one.
All right,
Janice,
thank you, Haki.
Oh, well, Haki mentioned another word that was there, game changer. And I think that those those two phrases are connected in the sense that I actually don't hear, well, I hear disruption, I hear innovation, but I don't hear disruptive innovation a lot, at least in my circles. But I do understand the point that's being made that these terms are used to hype up products, as Haki said, and it becomes uh, the buzzword becomes a way for people to, you try to search for the right term, but with the overhype, it clouds any real deficiencies in what they're trying to sell.
Mm,
And because you use these, people hide behind these buzzwords.
mm,
I think that's what I'm trying to say, and it's easy for people to look much more innovative than they
mm,
actually are, just because they throw these words around. And game changer, for example, is thrown around a lot also in organizational context to precisely also hype up any kind of these new initiatives that may or may not actually be game changing.
mm,
And it's a an unfortunate again usage of the language, the English language, when we try to hide behind all of these buzzwords that really mask in other thing, something that shouldn't be as hyped up as it should be.
Mm. Yeah, like my own thoughts about it is that hindsight provides the final verdict for whether something was game changing or truly disruptive as an innovation. I mean, I think like when the wheel was invented, that was a game changer. Yeah, because it allowed mobility for several thousands of years. I mean, I don't know how the Romans could have conquered the rest of the world, or Alexander the Great could have done it without the wheel. And so I tend to reserve judgment over whether something is truly disruptive or a game changer until, say, Life magazine comes out with a hardcover book that says 100 technologies that changed the world. And then read that and decide, well, yeah, they're right. Because these things were carefully curated already and were argued over and then finally presented as the true game changers. But today, those terms are being used all over the place. And it tends to make it meaningless because maybe you find something like a better focusing lens for a cell phone camera and then declare that as disruptive. Or you know how phones can now be folded and you have double the screen real estate, and they'll call that as disruptive. I don't think so. So, thank you for picking that one, Paul.
Actually, the funny thing about disruptive phones is I don't think among the three of us, anyone that I know can actually say he maximized his existing phone in the first place.
Right.
You know, I said, "Well, why do you want to buy a phone with more features when you haven't even finished maximizing this one?"
Mm.
Okay. I just read that scientists have developed a compact disc. It's about the size of a compact disc that can hold 40,000 movies.
What?
And I go, "Oh, movies." And I go,
Oh.
"You know, if you have 40,000 movies to choose from, you'll have difficulty finishing one." Okay. So what the hell? You know what I'm saying? But even things like that, those are things that are maybe for another day, okay? Because it's a much longer discussion on my end.
Mm.
But
I wanted to like, yeah, a thought quite came to mind, like, but it's understandable the why people use them. I mean, a big part of business is really perception and trying to market things. And if people are able to follow through, then it's well and good for them. I remember I I read through the biography of Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson, and a phrase that he loved using throughout his career in Apple was the phrase "insanely great." And that was a phrase that he first started using to describe the original Macintosh.
Mm.
It just so happens that Steve Jobs, most of his products that he called insanely great were actually insanely great. But
Yeah.
but a lot of it was also him trying to sell
Mm.
things and trying to make people believe that they were doing something that was really changing the world.
Mm.
And it developed a cult like following for Apple products.
Mm.
So it just it's understandable why people try to do this, and a lot of times it's just unfortunate that it's all rhetoric, it's all talk, more than actual substance in the products that they're trying to sell.
Mm.
right, right. Do we have time for one more, or do
Yeah,
we?
yeah. Let's. Okay, here we go.
You know, your turn.
Oh, okay. All right. Um, hmm. All right. I'll choose something that I'm not really thoroughly familiar with so that we can talk about it and maybe I'll learn something new. What on earth do they mean by new verticals? Whatever that is. Because, when I hear a term like that, new verticals, I think about high rise buildings. But what is it really? Does anybody know? Okay.
Well, I come from that industry.
Okay.
Okay. Sometimes it's called an LOB or line of business or a
Oh.
vertical. Okay, so if I'm a call center, let's go back to concentrics.
Mm-mm.
Okay, they might be arranged by verticals. When I say verticals, there's the healthcare column, there's the
Oh.
customer service column, and the customer service it might be broken down to levels. When I say levels, it might be broken down to because there's a tier two. When they say tier two, that means you're talking to engineers.
Mm.
Typical example: when you installed your cable a long time ago, the guy would have to call someone, right? The engineer, he'd have to call someone to turn on the box. And those calls go to a call center here. Okay, they're talking to the engineer, they're not talking to the client. Okay, so that's tier two, but all of that might be housed under the one vertical of the name of that telecom company that they're serving. So that's that vertical or line of business. So that's what they talk about verticals. Okay, sometimes you want to go into a new vertical in order to expand your business, or you have the capacity in your business, and you say, "Hey, I realize we can also do this, so let's start another vertical or another line of business."
Mm.
Okay, so that's what they mean when they talk about.
All
It's
right.
also
Now,
known as line of business or vertical. It depends on the organization you're talking to.
mm, mm. Okay. So, does anybody have a thought on new verticals apart from what Paul has said?
I'm actually very new to the term, so I
Mm.
actually just searched up while you guys were talking.
Okay.
So yeah, from what I've been seeing, it's like emerging markets. Correct me if I'm wrong. If
Mm.
you say new verticals, verticals is
Mm.
less like per department, but new verticals emerging markets like artificial intelligence, e-commerce, renewable, sustainable energy, and all that. So I'm guessing it's just another term for being in the know and being in vogue. But yeah,
Mm.
I don't have much to say about it because I have not encountered it too much. Maybe on
Mm.
verticals, I guess, because if you say verticals, it might be oversimplifying very complex industries
Mm.
and departments, and you ignore all of the nuances and variations in between. But I guess that I have not encountered that too much.
Mm.
Well, sometimes it's not a new business. It's a business that you know you have the capacity to enter. It's maybe it
Mm.
might be new for you, but it's not a new business per se. Okay, so but that's usually how it works. Okay.
Mm.
And in call centers, at least and how do you call it? In outsourced companies, verticals are really isolated because they don't want to share data, they don't want to share anything. So everything is you go into their office. If it's one vertical, they're all locked up in the room. They all have their own badge ID for that room. Okay, so that's how it's all separate.
Oh, I see. Mm. I just like to revisit very briefly disruptive innovation, and my feeling is that every decade or every generation seems to have that one individual who does create truly disruptive innovations. As Jan Ace pointed out, that was Steve Jobs, who maybe did that during the 90s. And then in this generation, it's Elon Musk with the Neuralink, for example, which is, if it ever becomes mainstream, is going to be very, very disruptive. Say goodbye to privacy of thought when a computer is linked directly to your brain.
Actually, the
uh,
bigger question there is who put in the algorithm into that Neuralink.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
That's the bigger headache.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's like,
Uh,
I
yeah.
go, huh?
My thinking, Paul, is probably that's the reason why Elon isn't married again, Imagine if his wife were a programmer and wrote the algorithm for that. He's only thinking about messing around, and his wife already knows. He doesn't even have to say anything about it because if you're connected to the Internet of Things, and she is too, she knows what you're thinking before you even get to say it. That's scary.
Just as a maybe a final thought, if you, when it comes to disruption, really think about it. Is he making society better? That's the question I always ask. Okay, because you know, Steve Jobs,
Mm.
yes, he created a lot of good things, but at the same time, he wouldn't allow his children to have smartphones. And he never put a warning on the smartphone and said, please only give this to your child when they're a certain age. He never put a warning on the phone. Why not?
Mm.
But yet he banned it from his children. How come?
Mm.
Okay. So I go, you start wondering, yes, you know,
Mm.
it's a great tool and everything, but is he really helping humanity?
Mm. Yeah,
Okay.
you're right, Paul, because it's used as a pacifier by parents to who can't be bothered to play
That's
with their
not, you
kids.
know, that's not the issue for me. It's not the pacifier. It's the damage it does to the kid
Mm.
more than anything else. Okay. And then we can have another conversation on this. But even, you know, because my thinking is uh, the Smones got far smarter, but we got dumber.
Right. Yeah.
And seriously, do you think AI will make us smarter or dumber?
Mm. That's a thought. That's a thought. Um, Colin
And
Blackwell did say that
yeah, go ahead.
if we don't learn to work with it, make it our digital assistant, like in the sense that it's augmented intelligence, we will become effectively extinct because there's pretty much nothing that it can't do. So,
Actually, the thinking there is, you know, our brains are naturally lazy.
hmm,
Period. When I say naturally lazy, our brains will always work to find a shortcut to get things done. And the simple reason there's thinking is it requires a lot of energy, okay, and it's difficult work for the brain.
hmm,
But at least at my age, okay, we did our thesis with a library.
right.
Okay, so we actually had to go there and look at the library and all this stuff. Now you could
Hmm.
just go to, you know, you can have AI write it for you. You can,
Oh, yeah.
all right. And then you think about it. I said, you know, that simple fact of you having to stretch your brain to just go to the library and go through all this stuff, it's exercise for you.
Hmm,
Okay, and then what? Now you take it away and just let AI do it. What's going to happen to your brain?
hmm.
Okay, so it's a crazy thing, but we could talk about that some other time.
All right. So, Paul, why don't you take us
Otherwise,
through?
yeah.
Mm.
Well, for our viewers, if you enjoyed any of this, you had fun like I did, and I'm sure Jan Ace, Hakee, and Dino also had fun today. Please click the subscribe, follow, and what's the other one? See, I forgot that. Subscribe, follow, and like. Okay, the bottom at the bottom. So it definitely helps us in with this show, especially if you want to hear more of this. And as always, learning is a never-ending journey with limitless vistas.